everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Fellas and listeners, welcome back to the 5 Yard Rush Daily Fantasy Sports Show, and we have a first for you this evening. As you can see, if you're watching this, there's not one, not two, but three of the DFS team now on. First time. It's only taken us 7 weeks, but here we are. I'm joined.
Let's not make it another 7.
No, we're hoping for a bit more consistency now. Holidays are out the way. Hard times are out the way. We're actually 17 minutes late. That is my fault. Technical difficulties. I do apologise. Apparently, I sounded like I was in a tunnel, echoing. So, joined by Mark. I'm joined by Jod, fresh from his holidays. Fellas, how are we doing?
You're doing well, Nick. You're just still enjoying that introduction. Still laughing every time I see your face on that banknote in those sunnies. You need to get the sunnies on the show, really, don't you? Like, I do love it.
Do you know what? The LEDs in this kitchen are bright enough. I could have probably worn them tonight. Not usually here. Not this is a different environment for me. Jod, everything good with you, my friend?
Yeah, it's good to be back. Like I say, been on holiday, so couple of weeks away. Still managed to do a couple of lineups over there, thanks to a good friend Kev online. Since when you're in Portugal, I learned that you can't do them over there, so I managed to let someone set up and pointless. So, but yeah, apart from that, all good, Nick.
All good, good stuff. This past week, fellas, DFS, talk to me. How was your weekend? How was your showdown? How was it all?
I'm just wondering if we can switch it to a college one rather than NFL as it stands at the moment. I don't know if you're up for that as well, Nick.
Please.
I'll leave now, shall I? I know even less about college.
To be honest, I don't know all that much either. I think it's just luck. I think, it's just coming down to luck. Last week was a little bit unlucky on that, actually. An injury probably cost me some decent cash, but there we go. That is the nature of the beast. But on the NFL front, how did we do, guys? Was it a break-even week? Was it a loss week? Did we have a good week? How did we get on?
A definite loss for me.
I made about $1 again, something like that. Something like I'm working for less than minimum wage anyway.
In DFS terms, Mark, you are cap in hand at the moment.
Yeah. What about you, Nick? Please give us some good news.
I wish I could.
Okay.
Not great at all. My successes in the past week have come from anything but NFL. So it's come from college. It's come from the NHL. Shockingly, it even came from the NBA. So the NBA started back up this week. I had a couple of tickets for the tip-off, the free contests, which I actually meant to enter last night, but I fell asleep with my phone in my hand as I was picking my lineups. I woke up and it was 3 a.m. So I scuppered myself a little bit there. But yeah, I feel like I've won in everything except NFL in the past week. So no, not good. Not good when you're on a show talking about the NFL either.
No, George's an NBA expert as well.
Yeah, I'm $3 from my free game. So I learned what you were saying last night in the chat, Nick, about it's a tough one because I went to sleep about 10-15 minutes before, woke up, Miles Turner out, falling over a ball boy in practice before, so he had a big fact zero. I think that's just unlucky. I don't think that's a regular thing in the NBA.
That is an anomaly, let's be honest. I don't think I've ever had a lineup scuppered by someone falling over a ball boy. If you're going to be out, that is probably as good a reason as you can get. That is the NBA equivalent of the dog ate my homework, I think. We've got another riveting Thursday night showdown ahead of us. I don't know where they keep picking these games from. In fairness, this week is probably a little bit better than some of the weeks that we've had previous, only because there are some exciting players that are on the field that do have exciting capabilities in terms of performance. But it's still not a great matchup on paper, guys. We've got the New Orleans Saints on the road to the Arizona Cardinals. So, shall we talk showdown?
Wow. What are we talk? What are we talk about? So both teams have been disappointing generally, haven't they? I would say. The New Orleans quarterback situation could end up being 2 quarterbacks playing tonight. Or 3 if you count Taysom Hill.
3 if Taysom Hill could be on the.
Yeah, exactly. And we're kind of hoping that Hopkins sort of wakes up the Arizona offense, aren't we? Really?
Yeah, I mean, there's
Jack's all in on him.
Yeah, I mean, there's with Marquise Brown picking up the injury this past week, and it was pretty much Marquise Brown or nothing. Well, Marquise Brown and a little bit of Zach Ertz sprinkled in. Dortch has been quiet for a couple of weeks now, and I can't even see his name on the slate. Is he injured this week? Oh no, he's down there, $4,800. So yeah, I think it's Hopkins is probably a sensible play because he is a volume. Thanks very much, Apple Watch, for that. He is a volume receiver, and he is a good red zone target, good safe pair of hands. If you were picking a captain for this game, is Hopkins the play for you, Jord?
I think he's definitely up there, but if I'm going again, I've been burnt so many times by Kyler Murray already this year, but I'd probably give him another go just with him being back. And just because, like I say, I know he's a great red zone threat, Hopkins, but you've got Rondell Moore in there as well, who he's really targeted a lot, and Zach Ertz. So if he can, and obviously I think it was last against us against the Seahawks last week. It's the first time he's rushed for 100 yards. So if we see that, it's really hard with Kingsby because you just don't know what he's going to do, do you? It's so bad as a coach he can get really at the moment in the NFL. But if he can, it seems to work letting Murray run. And if he has another game like that where he lets him run and calls plays, to use his legs, then it could be worth looking at Murray as a captain as well. But I would probably play Hopkins in. If I'm going to play a couple of lineups, I'd play Murray and definitely a Hopkins in one as well.
Yeah, interestingly with Kyler Murray, it feels like he's had a poor season so far, and realistically, by his previous standards, he has. But because he does have that rushing threat, he's always, even in poor games, his poorest game this season's fantasy scoring wise has still been 16.36, which for a lot of quarterbacks is sort of average to good. For I would say probably about 60% of quarterbacks in the league, maybe even 70%, are only really scoring that on a consistent basis week in, week out. Mark, your favourite play of this slate?
I think my favourite captain is just Alvin Kamara. I know it seems like an obvious play, but maybe it won't because of the pricing. The one, if you want to pay down for a play and have, because in Showdown you often need that sort of pump play, that really cheap one. I'd go for the tight end of New Orleans, Juwan Johnson, because Arizona gives up a lot of fantasy points to tight ends. He's a little bit in and out. Last few weeks he's been a bit inconsistent, but in Showdown you're just looking for that really cheap player to get a touchdown, aren't you, or something, or 4 or 5 receptions. So he'd be one as well. But yeah, I'm probably going to be captaining Alvin Kamara. I've had one lineup, the Alvin Kamara. Sorry. But I wouldn't be. One thing I wouldn't be doing is possibly play. I wouldn't play any. I'm not going to play any New Orleans quarterbacks because I just don't know what's going to happen there.
Yeah. I mean, Juwan Johnson was only priced at 800 last week. Granted, he was in a bigger slate than this. This is just a showdown slate, but yeah, I think Benjamin's been on and off the injury report this week, but could have, especially if the Cards establish a lead, could have a bit of a workload coming there. I'm with you, Mark. I don't really like any of the New Orleans quarterbacks. But that said, if I don't like them, does that make them a good play? Who's tipped to start tonight for them?
I think it's Dalton, isn't it, at the moment?
I thought it was Dalton, but
yeah. But he just needs, all it needs to happen is Dalton has a couple of bad or a few bad drives, and potentially, they bring in Jameis Winston and stuff, aren't they? So it's like, or even if he's doing well, they might bring in him. So then you got like Jack says, you got Taysom Hill vulturing touchdowns as well. But I think he's got what price is Taysom tonight?
Taysom Hill is 10,800.
That's as a captain, isn't it? That's his captain price. So he's going to be about 6'4" or something like that. No. Anyway, what if it is?
7'2".
7'2". Okay, 7'2". Nowhere near. Yeah, so that seems at that price he doesn't seem to offer the same value as he did earlier in the season in showdowns. But he will make or break the slate. He usually does.
I think James Conner's a game time. I saw James Conner's a game time decision. Obviously, that will be a benefit. Well, obviously, if you want to play Benjamin, that'll depend. It's likely that he might not start. I'm sure Cards have got a bye week, so next week, so they're maybe looking at potentially not playing him, and then obviously he's got 2 weeks there to recover. But I know Olave is back tonight, who gets a lot of targets, but I still think Thomas and Landry are out, and when all three of them out last week, Marcus Callaway, I think he ended up with, I think he only caught 3 from like 7 targets, so I think he's 4,800, sorry, I think he is. So that could be a play, but I think they normally target Olave a lot more, so that I don't know how much Olave is, but I think them two are going to be the ones wide receiver wise that get the most targets. But I know Juwan Johnson's a good player as well, because I think Cardinals at second worst against tight ends, and obviously Seahawks are the worst. And I can't remember what kind of game Johnson had against the Seahawks.
There wasn't a massive amount of production from him. No, 2 targets, 1 catch, 13 yards, and no scores. So, not a massive amount of production is an understatement. There was little to none. But it could be a good play. Just going back to Taysom Hill, I don't like the guy, and I don't know why I don't like him. And I like him even less when I've just clicked on him and seen the smug look on his face. I can't bring myself to play him because I don't like playing him. I don't enjoy playing him. So I'm not going there. Chris Olave, I quite like. You brought that one up, Jord. I think especially with Thomas being out, with Landry being out, clear path to target some volume there. And if you are creating yourself a little bit of a story of how you think this one will go, if you think New Orleans are going to be throwing the ball, then he's I would say a fairly safe play tonight in terms of his target share. He should be heavily targeted in this one. There's not a massive amount else at receiver for New Orleans, so yeah, it's not fantastic. I talked this one up like it was potentially one of the better Thursday games that we've had so far this season, but actually when we've broke it down, it's not very good at all, is it? And I think the all-in on Nuke is probably probably not a bad play that Jack suggested there.
Yeah, I think I actually think there's lots of different ways you can go, which actually makes it quite interesting. Sometimes on these showdown slates, there's there's only really sort of 6 or 7 pieces really, and then you're forced to fit in just a complete sort of pump play. But I think there's a few ways you can go. You can construct your lineup this way. The pricing is quite kind as well, I think. So
yeah,
we'll find out,
I think I don't think we need to really talk about that one anymore, guys. It's it feels like another one that could very, very easily disappoint. We shall see. Before we do move on to the main slate, I believe that you have some more strategy talk for us, Mark, in the segment that I have self-titled ! You had some math equations for us, I believe. So the floor is yours.
Well, we could also call this bit where go and make yourself a cup of tea, and then come back and I'll be finished. So let's talk a little bit about this. This has been partly inspired by a tweet I did earlier this week because we've seen quite a few people quite down and stuff about their own DFS seasons and stuff. And I'm hoping that this little math lesson will make people feel a little bit happier about themselves. So, Nick, I'm going to use you as my glamorous assistant on this one because you're a finance guy. So, Okay, so we're playing a game of you're going to guess a coin toss. You're going to bet £1 on each coin toss. Okay. Understand the principle? You call heads. I flip a coin. If it's heads, you get £2 because that's what you'd expect. If I flip a coin, you call heads and it's tails, I get the £1, okay? So if we did that for 100 times, you would expect to be break even, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would hope that I would win. At least.
You'd be break even, wouldn't you? Because you bet £1 on a 50-50 event and you're getting twice your money. So that's the basic principle of that. Now, just imagine for 1 minute. We're doing the same coin toss game, but I say to you, if you guess tails and you're right, rather than giving you £2 back, I give you £10. Okay? So if you bet
I'm
bet
liking
£1.
the sound of this game.
Yeah. So what are you going to do if I do that? If I offer you that? So if you guess heads, you get £2. If you guess tails, you get £10.
I'm going to go tails.
Every time?
Why not? It gives me the best avenue to win money.
You thought that was a trick question, didn't I? Didn't you? You thought it was a trick question. It's not. It's really not a trick question. Yes, you would go tails every time, and the reason you do that is because you're getting better odds back on your money than the chances of that event happening. Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason you're not going tails. Sorry, the reason you're going tails is not because you think it's going to be tails every time, correct?
Correct.
Cool. So that there is the basic principle of professional gambling, professional poker, and professional DFS. That's the idea there. You're always betting on, in this example, you'd always bet on tails, even though you don't think it's going to be tails every time, because in the long run, you're going to make money. Okay? To use a poker example, and there's a reason I'm talking about poker, because as we were talking about earlier in the week, lots of professional DFS players are ex-professional poker players. Now, I mean, professional DFS players, majority of them don't do content and stuff, so you wouldn't. And there's obvious reasons why for that, because they don't want to give away their edge, because it's literally how they make their living. So, to use a similar example with poker, if you had, say, 2 diamonds in your hand, and the flop came down and it was another 2 diamonds, you've got an approximate 36% chance of getting a flush on the turn of the river. Okay, so then a poker player would have to make the decision. Basically, they've got a 36% chance of getting a flush. Are they going to win with that flush, and are they going to get enough money back to make that worthwhile? And if they say going to get 5-1 on their money, on their stake, they would just play it every time. Again, they're not predicting whether they're going to get the flush or not. They just know if they do it enough times, they'll make money. Okay. So that's one of that. There is the same. Those principles with the coin and the cards are the same things. The reason that professional poker players are good DFS players, because they use exactly the same concepts. Okay. The other thing that poker players use as a concept is they don't really play. Like, if poker players, when they play poker, they don't really play their cards. They play the other people. Anybody who's watched any poker knows that or understands that. You're not it's the people who play the cards are when you play at home with your family, aren't they, and stuff it's like they're playing. If they're in, they've got something good. If they're folding, professional poker players play the players; they don't play the cards, and they use those same concepts in DFS. And they must be successful, these professional players, because that's how they earn a living. So what that actually means in terms of DFS is expected value. You want to make positive expected value lineups. So using our coin toss method with your £10, Nick, for your tails, your expected value of every flick is four. If I've done my maths right, it's £4. £4, because effectively it's 50-50 chance, head, tails. So every 2 goes, in theory, you win back 10. You spent 2. So it'd be £4. And so that's quite an easy one to put a number onto, even though I struggled. With DFS lineups, actually, it's quite hard to put a number on a positive lineup, a plus EV lineup. But as we've said, ever since probably the first episode of this show, Nick, we always talk about this. Lineup's got to be able to win in the GPPs, not just cash. Got to be able to win. Okay. So there's many ways of doing that. Some people, like old friend of the show, Sarah Meck, who's a professional DFS player, does that through having better projections. Some people try and do it like Jordan Cooper by trying to exploit the field with their mistakes. It'll be like we talked about when you and me were on the show 2 weeks ago, Nick, where we talked about in this segment before, looking at how most people are spending their money across their team. As in, if they're doing high quarterback, maybe don't do a high price quarterback, etc. So yeah, that's the basic principle of EV lineups. Now, the reason I wanted to bring that up is because I wanted to make the point. You can be the greatest DFS player, but you won't necessarily realize that value and stuff. So if people are playing, this is their week 7, they're having a bit of a downtime, doesn't mean you're not going to make a profit over the season. Doesn't mean you're not a good player. For example, using our finalize to go back around the circle, using our coin flip example, if heads had come up 10 times in a row, so you'd lost every time, it still would have been 100% the right decision to choose tails every one of those times. And that's the same with the DFS. If you're building lineups which you think will win, you think are good lineups that you can, even the results don't come the way you expect it to, you're still happy with how they're built. That doesn't mean you're playing badly. You're playing well. Don't judge yourself by those results. Finished.
You've blown my mind, Mark, with that. But very valid points. Very, very valid points. And I think as well, like you often say this, Mark, but a lot of the top DFS players lose a lot more than they win. But when they win, it's what they win that makes the difference. So
yeah.
I think key to, I think how you play DFS, if you were to sort of do a bit of an overview of your season so far, and if you are down, as you said, like that's not a throw in the towel. That doesn't mean you can't profit over the season. My advice would just be to review what contest you're actually entering, and it's going to sound really obvious this, and it is in DFS terms, but if you're entering a single entry contest, you've got just as much chance as anyone else at winning that contest if you build your lineup correctly. If you're entering a 20 entry contest and putting in one lineup and someone else puts 20 in, I always use the sort of like the raffle tickets where, if you buy a strip and someone comes along and buys 30 strips, by lots of averages, they have got a better chance of winning than you, because there's a chance that though the lineups might not be identical to your one, there will be players that will dip in and out of their lineups that you might have. So because of the diversity that they'll have across the lineups, it'll increase their odds naturally. So if just consider, and it sounds so stupid saying it, but just consider what contest you're actually entering and think about the chance you're giving yourself to actually win or cash. That was a mistake I made really, really early on when I started playing DFS. I was just entering any old contest because of the entry amount and not thinking of the consequences of doing it. And then wondering why my lineup that I thought was really good wasn't cashing, because you're up against a big field of people who have multi-entered a contest, and like you said, Mark, have probably looked at all the projections. They've built lineups with different combinations of people so that they've covered bases in case one receiver goes off and the other doesn't. Targeted high ownership, targeted low ownership. A lot of different variables. But yeah, that would be my advice to anyone that is having a bit of a struggling season so far, is just reevaluate the actual contest that you're entering. And also maybe even think about entering some of the, the double ups and stuff like that if you're struggling in terms of bankroll, because you can play those a little bit safer, I think, than necessarily you would in maybe a GPP contest where you outright really you're looking to try and win it and take it down. In a 50-50, doesn't matter if you finish first or whether you finish 49th in a field of 100. You're still doubling your money there on that, so you can be a little bit safer with it. Anything to add, Job, before we start chatting main slate?
I think just a quick one for me, like what I think Mark said it to him, but I'm thinking with the first episode I were on, obviously as a new DFS player, just obviously first of all it's about enjoying it, but just when you go into say an NFL slate, your Sunday slate, the money you're putting in, be prepared to put into your mind that you're going to lose that money, and obviously have that money as in like that's how much I'm willing to lose, and there's a good chance I will lose it. And I think that mindset can be a bit more positive when you do get wins, or even if you do lose it, you're not as. I'm guessing it depends on the mind of the person, but for me personally, just like I'm not going in expecting to win. I think if you build yourself up expecting to win, it can be even more of a negative when you don't win. You just go in and just enjoy it and enjoy the games. Like I love putting it on and then just sitting back and watching it. And I remember when I first started playing, I was constantly, and it's just nice just to sit back and just put your teams on, and then at the end of it, knowing that if you're not expecting to win, if you go in and then you go in and you've actually won, it's brilliant. If you aren't, you're going in expecting to lose anyway, so it's fine.
Yeah. I think part of it as well is like knowing what you want from it. I mean, how many times have we seen people? I mean, there's points where it doesn't feel like if it starts not feeling like it's fun, then you definitely have to reevaluate, because it is meant to be fun. And if you say, if you're expecting or sort of, it's not an investment plan, it's really not, And as I said to you, these guys who do this professionally, a lot of them have. There's ones who like these poker or cards backgrounds and stuff, like Sarabek and stuff, and there's ones who like these maths geniuses who know to simulate and things like that with using supercomputers and stuff and all these other things. And then there's other people who are just and then there's ones who sort of won a lot of money once and then they kind of can carry on using that bankroll to do well. I'm not describing 99.9% of people there. I'm really not. So I think it's understanding that it's fun, and the chances of you making it's a little bit like the professional footballer thing, isn't it? It's like everybody starts off as a kid thinking they're going to be a professional footballer, and how few of them make it. It's also true of DFS as well. Slightly different numbers, but like it's very true of DFS. You start enough, something unusual is going to happen for say any one of us three to become a professional DFS player. Yeah. Most of us will need our wives to leave us for one, and but probably from a financial point of view. So it's just understanding that. I'm saying it's fun. You can have fun with it, like you say, Jordan. Be prepared to lose it. Never bet more than you should anyway. That's just true anyway, isn't it? Bet more than you're prepared to lose. And remember, it's like it's like an 18-week regular season, so you want your bankroll to last that long, at least. So yeah. I think, and I think it's it's good, Jordan, that you as a relatively new player sort of realised that already. I think that'll hold you in good stead. Because there's been various times when I've done well, where I've been like, "That's it, I'm going to wipe my game down and stuff," and it never works out.
There's just a quick one as well. There's always a few free ones on Sunday on the NFL as well. If you just type in free tournaments, like there's the alcohol ones we can't enter over here and stuff because we've got the rights. But there's still 2 or 3. I think there's 2 or 3 this Sunday where free, and obviously there's a low chance of winning them, but they're free. So just enter the freebies like we were mentioning off air and just before. There's loads of NBA ones. Just go and attack them free ones and stuff. Because, like I say, it's fun, even if you don't know anything about the sport.
Yeah, especially with the free ones. And with NBA, as Nick can tell you might as well just throw darts at a ball.
You might as well just auto draft it. You've got as much chance of anyone else. No, they are not fun. Anyone who's getting into to DFS, that is the last sport I would recommend playing. But we're on a heater this week, fellas. We're all on heaters.
We don't know anybody who hasn't lost yet, Nick, on these free ones. But the whole of the UK DFS team is like winning.
I think that's why I didn't enter last night. I was terrified of the come down after the win on Monday. I was absolutely terrified of it, or Tuesday, whenever the season started.
And then David Bailey wins all that money, coming 14th out of 95,000 people or whatever. And he set the bar very high.
And it's typical of our good friend Sean, again, friend of the show, who he comes and sticks the boot in and lets him know it could have been good value for about 10 grand. Had he have
there's David, he's retired now.
Had he have put it in the main contest? Not the kind of thing you want to hear, really. Yeah. It's similar to when you lulled me into a false sense of being a millionaire the other week, Mark, after the showdown.
Don't. I'm paying for therapy to get me over the guilt for that. So don't keep bringing it up, please. Anyway, you're the man for NBA, according to Jack.
Yeah, that's absolutely not true. So do not DM me and do not hit me up because you will get nothing. Nothing but pain. But feel free to share the pain with me. It's all fun. All fun. Let's talk main slate then. We'll kick off with the quarterbacks. We've got a nice group of quarterbacks this week. Certainly at the top end anyway. But Jordan, you can kick us off. Are you paying up this week at quarterback? Are you paying down? Where are your funds going?
I think I'm paying down this week. I was looking at them and I was a bit like Mark. I was struggling to really be really confident in one, but then when I started looking at a few stats and I saw that Kansas City are not very good on defense in all the areas against everyone, and obviously Jimmy G is quite cheap, and obviously Jimmy G came off a good even though they lost to the Falcons, he came off a decent week, spreading it out to Kittle and Samuel and Ayuk. So they're the three. If you wanted to maybe stack, Kittle could be a good one because it seems like he's finding a bit of form. And obviously Jimmy G does turn the ball over a bit, but Kansas City, I think they've had one interception, so they're not very good at picking people off as well. And there's quite a few quarterbacks that's had clean games against Kansas City. So I think for the price, Jimmy G could be worth. And I just feel like a lot of people will be edging, will be going high this week, especially with Dak back. I think a lot of people are trying to attack Dak Prescott, to be honest with you, with him being back.
Yeah. Not really much of a drop off either with Jimmy when he's at home versus when he's on the road. So he's fairly consistent across the board. My concern with him is always his turnovers, and there's got to come a point where Kansas do click because there is some talent on the defense, but I get it. I just can't stand anything that is anything to do with San Francisco 49ers, if I'm being honest. But I would never let that cloud my DFS lineup. So I understand why you would maybe go there. And there's certainly a nice stack that you can put together there as well. Mark, please tell me you're not going down the Jimmy G route.
No, but I do like it because I think Kansas City are going to mean that they're going to get ahead, and so he'll have to pass. He's got lots of options, and in some of those players, they could be big plays as well. So actually, I do I like him more than I did. But the other player I'm thinking about for very similar reasons is Jared Goff. He's the ultimate boom or bust so far this year. He's actually been the QB1 for 1 week. I think he's been in top 10 at least twice, and then he's been like the worst for like 2 or 3 weeks. But I think they've just coming off the bye. Hopefully, Amon Ross and Brown and DeAndre Swift are a little bit healthier than they were. And I think Dallas will push them, and they'll be chasing the game. So I think if you're paying down, he could be another option. And I doubt, because it's Jared Goff, he'll be that high owned in tournaments.
No, I wouldn't have thought so. He's having a pretty good season so far. That Dallas defense is a problem for anyone.
They haven't played many great teams though.
They've not, and you can
good
good
offensive teams.
Yeah, you can add the Rams to that last week as well because they just didn't show up, weren't at the races, and haven't been all season thus far. But yeah, I get what you mean. I think it's sneaky good, the Detroit offense, because it's not really got any like household playmaker kind of names on there in terms of like there's no Cooper Kupp, there's no Jamar Chase, there's no Jefferson, there's no Chubb, Barkley, there's no one like that, but they're just an offensive unit that are putting up points this season. And one thing that has tainted Jared Goff in his career so far has been his turnovers. And I mean, 11 touchdowns, 4 turnovers, 4 interceptions. It's not awful, that actually. No. That's a good solid start to his campaign. So again, don't hate that. I think he'll be low owned. I don't hate either of those picks, fellas, if I'm honest. Are you tempted at all by anyone around the top?
I'm not sure about you, Mike. Herbert could be just because he's against Seattle, but I feel like even though he hasn't been at his best at times, I don't know how much that injury is, he still could be high owned. But if he does click, he's definitely going to put numbers against the Seahawks defense.
I think you could, George. I think it's. I think he'll be
kicking the boot in there, Mac.
Yeah, I think he'll be. I think you're right. It'll be popular. That game will be popular as a whole. I also think Joe Burrow might be popular after last week, and I think this could be a classic sort of letdown spot against Atlanta. I think so, and I think actually Joe Mixon could be the play for that game. But yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong with Mahomes and Jackson, really, in theory and stuff. It's just you want to save the money, really.
Yeah,
Rodgers at 6,000 seems weird.
Yeah, that's it. Again, it's a defense that has given up points this year, but don't really like what I'm seeing from Green Bay, if I'm honest. I like that Seattle and LA game on both sides of the ball. I think I like that. Geno Smith, though, last week, not fantastic against Arizona. He's been steady good this year as well. Big scores against New Orleans and Detroit. I think this game could go a very similar kind of route. I think it could end up being a bit like the Chargers and Browns game the other week. Maybe not as ground dominated, but I think Eckler's on a bit of a heater at the moment. He'll be involved. And DK Metcalf, finally Tyler Lockett seems to have come alive. So it could be a good game there for Geno. It could be a good game for her, but I don't mind either of those picks. I do think it'll be a high scorer. Running backs then, fellas. Mark, kick me off with your pick of the bunch.
I've got to look up. I've gone with Zeke, which again, I think he's going to be low owned because of Zeke. He never gets that much ownership. I think it's also the reason I've gone. Well, firstly, the Detroit defense is like this, gives up the second most, I think, fantasy points to the running back position. But also, I think he'll get overlooked against that terrible Detroit defense because people will be going to Dak, as we talked about before. and they'll be stacking him with CD Lamb and people like that. So I think for me, it could be a good leverage play in that game, which should be quite high scoring, and he's a nice bring back with my Detroit Jared Goff stack as well.
Any concerns there with Pollard?
Not particularly. I mean, obviously they are. You are hoping that Zeke gets all the sort of inside the 10 or 5 yard touches, but this is something we talked about before. The whole of the Twitterverse tells us that Pollard's the better running back, but the coaches still give Zeke like 60-65% of the touches, and Pollard 35 to 40%, and we see that all the time. Like Khalil Herbert, Montgomery, and things like that and stuff. So there's a little bit. I mean, it'd be even better if there was no Pollard around, but equally, if that was the case and Zeke was only 6,000, maybe he wouldn't be such a good leverage play.
Yeah. And you can see the volume there with the attempts. He might not be as efficient with the attempts, but the volume's certainly there. Okay. So we're paying down at running back then. So, Jord, talk to me about your pay down.
Yeah, I've gone over Travis Etienne from the Jags, and obviously everyone's talking about how the Giants have done, and they have done well. They're sitting at 5-1, I think it is, isn't it? And but they've still give up 5.6 yards a carry, and I think just over 140 yards a game rushing. And Travis Etienne over the last couple of weeks has seen a lot more volume, and I think he's the this is just in receptions. He's the second most targeted in receptions in the red zone behind Christian Kirk compared to everyone else that's there. I think it's only 4, but still with his work rate going up as well compared to Robinson, who started off on fire. Robinson, like he was getting a lot of the bulk. Travis, obviously coming off the injury last year, Travis Etienne seems to have been warming up, especially over the last 2 weeks, and it's just one of them where I'm not sure what the percentage ownerage would be, but it just feels like a lot of people will be focusing on Barkley and maybe not actually looking at on the other side where, like I said, the Giants are quite good against the pass, but against the run they've struggled a bit.
Yeah, James Robinson is actually surprisingly still coming in as he's priced $500 more than Etienne, and I find that a little bit feels a bit of a misprice because the usage for Etienne in the last couple of weeks has actually been the greater of the two in terms of rushing attempts and usage in passing downs as well. So I'm a little bit surprised at that. Obviously, I don't know if the goal line work is still being hawked a little bit by Robinson there. I've not watched too much of the Jags over the last couple of weeks, in all honesty. I'd be interested to see the stats behind that. But that's a bit of a surprise, I think, there. No, I like that play because I noted ETN myself that his usage is certainly on the up, and he came into the league as a receiving back as well, and we're starting to see that coming through as well in his usage. So it is good to see, obviously, bounce back season for him after that injury. That is 2 running backs. Zeke at 6, ETN at 5-4. Are we spending up at this position? Because we've gone budget quarterback, we've gone budget running back so far. So where are the funds going, fellas?
Eckler's going to be the most. I think Eckler and Jacobs are going to be the most popular running backs, just because of matchups and stuff this week. Definitely Jacobs at 6.5. I think coming up to the worst defense for fantasy points allowed against running backs in Houston. And Josh Jacobs, of course, got a lot of volume last couple of weeks, and they're coming off a bye. So I think it'll be the most popular. I think it's partly, Nick, because I think we don't want to be so obvious and just pick the most expensive players all the time. Because what sort of analysis is that?
That is a fair comment, and we are of course here to shed light on some of these little diamonds in the rough.
But Derrick Henry does interest me because he doesn't seem to be getting the ownership he used to get. I'm just checking out some stats.
Yeah. I like the Henry play. He had a good. I think he had. I don't know if it was his best game, but had a good game against the Colts early on in the season, and Colts have done. I think they've done not do too bad against them. But I fancy if we're going to pay up as well, Nick Chubb obviously not a bad week for him last week compared to what he's done this year. And I think he's historically done pretty well against the Ravens. So that could be a decent play. Like I say, I think didn't get anything last week, did he, compared to what he had done the weeks before?
Yeah, I think that was probably more down to game script. I mean, New England just swallowed them, and in typical Bill Belichick fashion, he took away the strongest part of the offense and made them do anything but that, which was throw the ball. And there's not exactly a great quarterback there in Cleveland at the moment that's got the capability to do that. So Nick Chubb has been heavily leaned up.
He's no Zappy of New England.
No, he's not. Who knew that the answer to the quarterback question in New England was Zappy? Yeah. Derrick Henry, I like that shout. 3 games. He scored in his last 4, but 3 games of the kind of production that we expect to see from him. Multiple scores against Washington, I'm sorry to remind you of, Mark, and coming in fresh off a bye week as well. So, yeah. Yeah. I like that pick. I like that. Lenny Fournette, I feel like, I've seen some big highlights from him in recent weeks as well, and Brady's not looking like the Brady of old. All of a sudden, he's starting to look a little bit old. So Lenny Fournette's usage has started ramping up a little bit there as well. Before we move on to the receivers, is there anyone else at the running back position that you want to talk about?
I won't say too much about him, but I think Breece Hall's still a good play as well. He's been doing well, and I think we've seen Denver struggles and stuff, and it could be either a close one or they could run the ball a lot. And I don't think they do that well against. I know they kept Eckler quiet, but if you go back in previous weeks, they have struggled against the running backs.
Yeah, the early season you couldn't really separate him and Carter. I think it's quite clear now who the RB1 is there in New York, and it's not even just the attempts; the actual snap share as well is well in Breece Hall's favour. So, yeah, I like that. We'll move on. I'd like
to play 4 running backs this week, by the way, if I could, because running back seems to have so much value. It's like making a comeback.
Yeah,
it's after all of that, I said at the beginning of the season, just don't pay out for running backs and stuff and all that. Just pay for the values in wide receivers. But that has changed, it seems to me.
I thought you might have brought up Brian Robinson, Mark.
Nah, well, let's see what he does first. So there's some good. I mean, there's a lot of bad offenses in the NFL this year. But there's enough good ones there, George, that we don't have to go down that route yet. I think Terry McLaurin is the new Kenny Golladay, as in he gets talked up on shows all the time and just never does anything. There you go.
He's got his favourite quarterback back now, hasn't he?
Oh yeah. Well, he gave the Bucs the toughest playoff game when they won it, didn't he? So he looked like Superman in that game. But yeah, we'll see.
Play him. Plug him into your lineups. Old Tyler Heineke. Get him in there. What are you shaking your head for, Mark? He's all right.
he's all right, but he's not a fantasy player, is he?
There'll be that
one
week.
Zappy. Not when you got Zappy. Is Zappy on the old slate this week?
Wide receivers, then. Is the money going here? Is some of the budget going into this position, or are we paying down again? Looking at the picks on the spreadsheet, I think I'm going to have to scroll.
Oh man, this is funny. I think it's your turn, George.
There is some good higher volume, but I thought I'd just sneak in this guy because when he came out of college, I was a bit of a sucker for him. I thought he was a good player, underused at Michigan. But Nico Collins for the Texans, and he's been outperforming Cooks over the last couple of weeks. And I still like the Cooks play as well. I think Cooks could be a good player because obviously they're playing the Raiders. And the Raiders, I think they're quite. I can't remember the yards, but they give a lot of yards to receivers, and they gave up 11 touchdowns to wide receivers as well this season. And obviously Nate Hobbs injured, their best cornerback with the lockdown cornerback really, and they were still giving up a lot of plays. So I do like Nico Collins this week for a nice budget option, but it fits in with. I like that Jacobs at running back as well. If you're going to play Jacobs, you can play either Nico Collins and bring Cooks back as well. Either one, but I did see a stat. I think Tom put it up that they actually give more yards up to wide receiver 2 than they do wide receiver 1. But I don't know if that's because Nate Hobbs were there. I don't know if that's going to change because he's out.
And as I always say on this wide receivers 1-2 and slot thing and stuff, the defense know this as well. So then, they're going to try and rectify it if the best player is there and stuff, or they see a danger. But yeah, I've gone cheap as well, Nick, as you know. Alec Pierce of Indianapolis. Basically, theory behind this is, so Tennessee give up the most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. So, but I think Michael Pittman is a little bit too expensive. But the other thing is, I don't think many people are going to stack Matt Ryan with Pittman and say Pierce, because I don't think people are going to play Matt Ryan. And therefore, I think Pierce is fine to use as a one-off to save money, in your lineups and stuff. So, or if you have him with opposite Derrick Henry, obviously, as well. So, yeah, I do like him. I just think Pittman's a bit overpriced in comparison.
Yeah. I think them two are the guys that get the high targets as it stands at the moment. And the tight ends is so... They've got 3 tight ends there at course. You just don't know which guy's going to get the most... get the targets and the touchdowns. I think it were, can't remember who it was this week that's just gone. It with the rookie, wasn't it? Jelani Woods, but sometimes it's Miles Cox and Granson as well. So, but I do like the Pierce one. But if you wanted to pay up, I think Pittman's a good choice as well. Yeah,
but I think he's expensive on his own, and also if he's going to be that expensive, you're not going to stack him with Matt Ryan.
That's true.
Then I think that's kind of the thing. Maybe that's a great way to go different than GPP. Ryan Pittman, Pierce, and bring it back with Derrick Henry. I don't know. Pretty brave man. Jordan, you were talking about putting your money in expecting to lose, weren't you? That might be the ultimate play for that.
I mean, I didn't expect that when we moved on to receiver that I'd have to use the actual player search function not once but twice, because I had no idea where those two were priced on this list. We don't have Cooper Kupp this week, so an automatic inclusion in the lineup has been removed. However, we've got Jimmy G, picked by yourself, Jod. Mark, you went with Jared Goff.
Yep.
So we've got 2 receivers here in Deebo Samuel and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Are we stacking both with those quarterbacks?
I mean, you got to do Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think before his injury, he was just on fire. But and he's had an extra 2 weeks to recover. I'll be interested to see what we say about Deebo though, George, because he's lost since Jimmy BG's. He's lost his rushing attempts, and he's not scoring as much as he certainly has done in the past.
Yeah, it's obviously I think he had 2 rushes last week, didn't he, Deebo Samuel, something like that. But you couldn't separate them with targets. I think Ayuk had 11 and Kittle and Deebo had 10. Obviously, I know we're going to move on to Titans, but I like the Kittle stack if we're going to stack, with Jimmy G. But if I had to pick one, I'd probably still go Deebo, even though Ayuk came off his best game last week. I'd still probably go Deebo in the hope that he could get somewhat. There was always a chance that he could get some more rushes. I don't know what the injury is like, if any of them are back, the guys, because obviously they've been slim at running back as well.
The other interesting thing about Deebo, is the stacking of it, because if you're playing if you play Jimmy G stack, you have to bring it back with Kelsey. Really, you haven't got any other option because the wide receivers and stuff. So actually, I think that might make people then play Mahomes and Kelsey to then bring back with the San Francisco receivers, etc. So as I'm saying out loud, it just makes the Jimmy G play seem even better to me. I know we're not talking quarterback right now, but it's just got me thinking about it. How people going to stack it?
It's not like Jimmy Kittle's only 5'3" as well, which isn't too bad really for like I don't know what he's been in the past. Obviously not this year because he's been injured for most of it, but he's always seemed to be a high end guy and stuff. And like I think I did a lot. I just kind of moved on to tight end here, but like I did a Kittle and Kelsey stack, and you still could do pretty well across the board by just having them to obviously paid down with Jimmy G, like you said, and you're not gonna. You don't like lose anything by having them two, as in like you don't have to always go low at wide receiver. You can still have a Pittman in there with a couple of like 5,000 wide receivers.
And if you're gonna play both of those, you'll definitely have some uniqueness to your lineup as well, because there's few that play two tight ends because it's just not a position that people spend a lot of money in. So to actually play two of the top end priced tight ends will probably add quite a bit of uniqueness to your lineup, I would have thought. I think with Debo, of all the 49ers, he feels like he has the biggest sort of like big playability kind of output. Possibly Jeff Wilson in there as well. He's always good for breaking off a decent run, Jeff Wilson. I was just curious before we do move on to tight ends. Amari Cooper, once again at home, returns a 14.4. There you go.
Sorry.
Amari
two
Cooper
homes. Sorry. Yeah.
He continues the run of performing in home games, but absolutely stinking it up in away games. So yeah, there we go. The streak continues.
We've been on him, haven't we? We've been on him the last 2 weeks, Nick.
We have. I mean, that's not a fantastic week by any stretch, but there's still a score thrown in there, 14.4. It's not too disappointing. It's certainly not an iceberg, or an ice snowflake, whatever it is on DraftKings when they're super cool. But yeah, he continues to perform at home. He is on the road this week at Baltimore, so fade completely. But watch out for the next home game.
I think there's loads of good options at wide receiver, by the way, especially in that sort of 5 to 7K range. But there's hardly anything other than Pierce and now Nico Collins below 5K.
Tight ends. So we've got a bit of a contrast here. I know we've already mentioned Kelsey, we've mentioned Kittle, but we've got a bit of a contrast here in who you'd actually both put down as your spend at tight end. So I'll start with you, Mark, because you're more in the favoured end of the spectrum, shall we say? The bit that I actually want to hear about is the tight ends that we know will provide some production there. So go on.
I might disappoint you here for the reasoning, because the reasoning I've picked Andrews, as it were, this is before I realised he missed 2 practices, was that there's so many cheap tight end options this week. I think generally people generally tend to spend down anyway, but I think even more so this week, because there's like 4 or 5 options under 4K, which I think are going to get a lot of ownership and rostership, and therefore Mark Andrews or Kelsey I think will be under-owned, a little bit like last week. Kelsey was definitely under-owned I think last week, as was Mahomes. So it's not specifically Mark Andrews I'm interested in, even though he's been so consistent this year. But it could be Andrews, could be Kelsey. I love George's 2 tight end approach. I did try it with Kelsey and Andrews before we came on, but I really couldn't get it to work properly. But equally, I hadn't heard about Nico Collins at that point. So we'll see. Maybe I'll revisit it. But yeah, I do like these. I do like the 2 tight end options this week. But that was the main reason for it, Nick. I know it seems obvious, but I think possibly this week more than any other week, they might be under-owned.
I mean, I don't. I get what you're saying there, Mark. Keep an eye on his injury. You keep an eye on the Baltimore Ravens injury report, because he's apparently missed. He was given the rest day on Wednesday, but he didn't participate in practice again today. So he's trending towards potentially questionable and game time decision. The thing is with Andrews is, aside from the week 4 game against Buffalo, and the first game of the season against the Jets, you look at the Miami, New England, the Cincinnati, and the Giants game, he's putting up Cooper Kupp kind of numbers. He's getting targeted heavily, a lot of receptions, touchdowns in all 4 of those games, one with a multi-score game. Like he's high end on the price side, but it doesn't feel like a bad option at that price. And we don't like paying up at tight end normally, but it feels like a safe way of paying up because, again, there's not a great deal of production coming from the receivers in Baltimore. But Mark Andrews does it every week almost, quite consistently, and the weeks where he is doing it, like I said, Cooper Kupp kind of numbers. So, yeah, I do like that play, and for the reasons that you gave as well around the ownership. Jod, I know obviously you had your eye on Kittle, but there's someone else I know you've got your eye on as well.
Yeah, I've gone for Hurst from the Bengals, and I just think going off last week, it's the best game that Burrow's had with the guys, and it's a weird one because like I've obviously looked at the Falcons give up just over 70 yards to tight ends. That's average a game, so that's a lot. And obviously, I've seen a few concerns where, like, if Cincinnati blow the top off it against Atlanta, but Atlanta have stuck around with a few teams this year, even when they've lost. But even if they do, I just fancy him. It's kind of like my theory. Probably wrong, but that even if they do blow the lid off it, I fancy him just to keep throwing it around a bit more because they've been so sluggish before last week. They finally got hot last week. With Chase and stuff. I fancy maybe even if they do get stretch out to lead, I still fancy that they could throw it around a bit more just to stay hot and also, yeah, David's put revenge game as well. I didn't even process that, so it makes it even better and even sweeter choice. But yeah, just obviously the big one was how many yards that the Falcons give up. I think we mentioned it with the Cardinals, on the Thursday night game. So yeah, and I think he's quite cheap. It went about paying down at tight end. It's a good pay down as well, and he's been pretty consistent over the last few weeks after a slow start.
So I think there's always a bit of a false DFS myth about this. Teams that get way ahead and then they stop scoring fantasy points. But to get that far ahead, you've got to score a lot of fantasy points.
Yeah.
So, I think that's, I don't always hold with that. And I think also, like you say, Jordan, there's teams that still pass around and carry on as if they're behind and they carry on playing because the NFL has changed in the way it plays and stuff. I think we've already talked about that this year. I think maybe a couple of weeks ago, Nick, we said about it. It's like, it's not the NFL where it was the old, if you're ahead, you run the ball, if behind, you pass the ball. That's not it. That's not the NFL anymore. And therefore, for DFS, I think it's less of a thing.
Yeah. I think like teams are wise to that kind of thing now. Like if you've got a big lead, teams are expecting that you probably are going to run the ball because it's the easiest way of running the clock down, keeping the ball in play. And the team that's doing that, it's giving an opportunity for the other team, potentially if you're going to close the run down, stack the box, whatever it might be, you're giving them the opportunity to get back in the game. We saw it with the Falcons in the Super Bowl the other year. They had a massive lead on New England and just completely threw it away in the end. Just not managing the game the way it should have been. Things that had worked in the game, they just completely moved away from. But it's just like you said. I think it is a myth, and you find a lot of teams now. If you get to sort of third quarter and the team's 20 odd points ahead, the starters are still going to be coming on. They're still going to be throwing the ball. They're actively still in this league now. They turn the screw, and you get a guaranteed win before you start thinking about sitting your quarterback in the fourth quarter and running the clock down. I think so. Yeah, I'm with you there. Don't really want to talk too much more about tight end because we do always spend far too much. We even started talking about tight end when we were talking about the receivers.
Yeah. And I think we just mentioned one thing about tight end though. I think you guys will know this because you know college more than me. There was it the Denver tight end who had his first game on Monday?
Greg Dulcich. Greg
Yeah,
Dulcich.
I think he's minimum priced. I think he's like
he's really low. I saw someone put it up.
Yeah, so I think he's going to get a lot of ownership, which is, but I say there's a whole load of them under 4K, which get a lot of ownership.
2,500.
There you go. 2.5, and he got 12 points last week in his first game. There you go.
Yeah,
I mean, he doesn't look like he could be in the NFL on that picture. He looks like he should be in Stranger Things. But yeah, not bad. 2.5. I get the theory there behind it.
That's why I want to pay up at tight end this week.
Yeah,
just because of that mustache.
That's a dodgy one. That needs to go. Strong wind, and that is coming off. Let's talk defenses then briefly. George, you can kick us off.
Kick us off and finish, Jordan. I haven't got any defense to talk about.
Well, I've just learned from you from when I first started. Pay down at defense, and Panthers are the second. Well, I think the joint lowest out there with the Seahawks. I think, and just even though they're not winning games, Panthers, the defense doesn't get that bad at points, to be honest with you. And obviously at home to Tampa, and we saw last week that even Tom Brady had to give his offensive line a telling off on the sidelines to get better. So yeah, Tampa Bay could come in, and you never know with Tom Brady and this, but as it stands, they're struggling, and Panthers do get to the quarterback. So I'm hoping that it continues. Like I say, that I think they've had one. I think they do get points scored against them, but they just get turnovers and interceptions that get you points up, which is I'm hoping for. And obviously paying 2,200, I just thought have a stab.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. They've got 3 defensive touchdowns in 6 games as well, which is a very high rate. So yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, even when you look a little bit earlier in the season, they're keeping games fairly low scoring and close. They're keeping passing yards down. They're seemingly a defense that you can run on a little bit, but yeah, I don't mind that. Like you said, Tampa Bay having some issues there. We know obviously about the personal issues with Brady, which we won't go into on the show because we obviously don't want lawsuits. But Mark, anyone for you?
I really didn't put much thought into defense. I just fit them in. It's like what fits. I quite like Washington at that price. So I know
I was just going to say the Commanders.
Yeah, because I think they'll get sacks, and Green Bay really haven't been that impressive on offense. Yeah, look at all those sacks they've got.
Yeah, the defense of last year is suddenly starting to wake up because they were quite a sack heavy defense last year as well. I felt the Commanders. So yeah, I don't mind that play. I think the Jets as well. I think let Russ Cook is now injured. I think we're down to sort of bare bones with Denver. Russ hasn't been doing much cooking. Melvin Gordon doesn't really look like the old Melvin Gordon. Yeah, I quite like that.
Yeah,
Jets D's been showing up as well.
That was my other call. And obviously Broncos are welcome to come back for Drew Lock if they want from us and offer us a pick, if they're needing someone.
You said that because, in case the Denver GM is watching right now and stuff, George. Is that what that is?
I thought you told me that all the top GMs watch, Mac.
They did until I started talking about maths, and then they all switched off.
Well, I think I'm gonna throw a lineup together. We'll finish up with a lineup build. I'll just go with some of the players that we've mentioned, and I'm going to start at running back. And I'll just throw in a couple of the guys that have been mentioned, which were Zeke and Travis Etienne. We'll start there, and then we'll make our way back to it. Do you know what? Actually, I'm going to throw in the cheap receivers that you've mentioned as well, because I just want to know what we're going to be left with. Let's go back there.
Collins. That's it.
Collins, yes. Wow, look at this.
Put in your Panthers D. Put the Panthers D in as well. See how much money you've got after that.
Panthers D. That's the way it's going. Definitely. Out of the two quarterbacks, we've got Goff on the road to Dallas, Garoppolo home to Kansas City. Who would we rather hang our hat on of the two? Think
You're
about
have to
the
stack
stack.
them both, aren't you? Yeah. I would do Garoppolo, to be honest with you. George convinced me.
It pains me, but okay,
I was going to say
we might
if we go crazy and go all out with Matt Ryan, as we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not going there. I'm going to put a stop to that straight away. But if we're going to throw in Garoppolo, I'm going to throw in the bring back with Kelsey. Do we want to put in Kittle or Samuel?
What does it leave you with if you go Kittle? What have we got? Oh,
Well, if we go Kittle, we can have any receiver we want.
We can have anybody you want, I think.
Or
you could have Adams if you wanted to. You could have Adams then to opposite Collins.
What about if he
alternatively, if you did want to go Samuel in the flex, you've got anyone that is Josh Jacobs down. So if you do want to, I mean, Josh Jacobs' ownership probably going to be a little bit high this week, I would have thought. But
I don't think you need to worry in that lineup about it. I don't think you need to worry about in that lineup, Jacobs, because you've got Pierce and Collins.
It's unique enough. It's absolutely unique
and Garoppolo. Enough. Yeah, it might be too unique.
What would you do if you had Andrews in the flex? How much does that leave you instead of Samuel?
So if we were throwing Andrews in the flex, we're 6-7, which puts us around the DK Metcalf kind of region.
If only Amari Cooper were at home.
That would be problem solved.
I quite like Lazard out of those ones on the screen right now because he's on the field all the time and the Commanders, defense at the back is pretty awful. But I did actually like your Adams. I don't know which he had. I think it was it Kittle instead of Andrews, and then you had Devontae Adams. I really kind of like that.
So Adams and Kittle, which stacks with Jimmy. Yeah. And we've paid up at receiver there still.
Yeah.
I think if I was putting this lineup in, I like that. I quite like the Debo at receiver and Josh Jacobs in the flex as well.
Yeah.
Which we're pretty much on budget with both lineups, but I wouldn't mind either of those. In all honesty, I'd maybe even throw it in twice if I was that way inclined.
I think that's way better than I thought it was going to be. Also, the Kelsey Andrews was a far better version I could build on my own beforehand. But obviously, a lot of it all comes down to Pierce and Collins. So
we can thank the player search function for the lineup this week on that. Thank God for that. Well, who knows? We might be here again next week as a trio. Fingers crossed, them fellas, that we will be. But it's been a great hour and 13, going on an hour and 14 minutes speaking to you both this week. It's nice to have us all on there. I'm gonna assume that we've got no parting comments. In that case, gamble responsibly. Catches for sure, touchdowns for dough, and we will see you hopefully next Thursday as a 3.